Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to Shawnee's Sunday School. I'm so happy that you are here with me again. This is our third week together, and I'm really happy that you are here. I have another story from my book, My Bible Friends, to share with you, and this one is called David, the Youngest Boy. Have you heard this story before? This is one of my favorite Bible stories, and I'm really happy to share it with you today. Let's find out what happens to David. 8 brothers standing in a row. The youngest boy at the end is David. David and his brothers lived on a farm near a small town. David was a shepherd's boy. He took care of his father's sheep. To David's town came Samuel the prophet. The prophet invited all the people to a special feast. David's brothers were going to the feast. David's father was going to the feast. But the brothers said to David, "You are too young to go. You stay home with the sheep." Are you the youngest in your family? Has that ever happened to you before? David took his harp under his arm. He tucked his sling in his belt. He opened the gate to the sheep pen. "Come, sheep, come, lambs," he called. The sheep followed David down the path. Black lamb and curly lamb walked on each side of David. David led the sheep to a green grassy place. While the other sheep nibbled grass, Black lamb and curly lamb played jumping games and bunting games with other lambs. David played tunes on his harp and kept close watch of the sheep. He's doing a good job taking care of them, don't you think? Uh-oh. Looks like might be some danger. Black lamb began to wander away up over the hill. David put down his harp and ran after him. He brought Black lamb back to the flock. Then David saw a weed that would make sheep sick if they ate it. He pulled up the weed and threw it away. A jackal sneaked around a rock towards the sheep. David stamped his foot, and the jackal ran. Wow, he's doing a great job. David took a sling from his belt. It was a long, long sling that his father had made for him from strong brown leather. He put a smooth stone in that sling. Now what should he hit? That red rock? He would try. Around and around he swung the sling. Zing went the stone, and ping, it hit the red rock. David put another stone in his sling. He would aim for that round black hole in the tree. Around and around and around he swung the sling. Zing went the stone, straight into the round black hole in the tree. He's very accurate, isn't he? Then David heard a noise. It wasn't a hopping, thumping noise like a rabbit running through the grass. No, it wasn't a rabbit. It wasn't a picking, packing noise like a bird pecking on a tree. No, it wasn't a bird. It was a snuffling, gruffling noise like a big animal prowling around. It was... Do you have a guess as to what animal it might be? Oh my goodness. Ah! It was a bear. A fierce brown bear. And he was sneaking closer and closer and closer to where the lambs were playing. The bear crept up behind a bush, ready to snatch Curly Lamb as she ran by. Oh my goodness. Quickly, David put a stone in his sling. He ran straight toward the bear. Around and around and around he swung the sling. Zing went the stone. It hit the fierce bear, and the bear fell. David picked up his frightened little Curly Lamb and carried her in his arms. Black Lamb came close to his side. "Come, sheep, come, lambs," called David, and he led them to a place where they would be safe. While the older sheep nibbled the new green grass, Black Lamb and Curly Lamb again played jumping games with other lambs, and David played tunes on his harp. Now, while David was watching the sheep, Samuel the prophet made ready the feast. David's father was at the feast, and David's brothers were at the feast. Before they sat down to eat, the prophet said to David's father, "Have your boys walk before me one by one. Then God will choose one of them for something very special." David's oldest brother walked before the prophet. "No, this is not my boy," said the prophet. The next oldest brother walked before the prophet. "No, it is not this boy," said the prophet. And then the next oldest brother walked before the prophet. The prophet shook his head, and what do you think he said? "No, not this boy." One by one, David's brothers walked before the prophet, but each time the prophet said, "No, it is not this boy." Then the prophet asked David's father, "Have you no other boys?" Only the youngest boy. He is herding the sheep." "Send for him and get him," said the prophet. David came running, his harp under his arm, his sling in his belt. His cheeks were red. The wind blew his hair. "Walk before the prophet, David," said his father. David walked before the prophet. "This is the one," said the prophet. "This is the boy God chooses." The prophet poured sweet-smelling oil on David's head to show that he was the chosen one. "Now we shall sit down to the feast," said the prophet. A place was made for David as he sat with his fathers and his brothers. Why had David been chosen? What would he do? No one knew. It was a secret. David's father didn't know, David's brothers didn't know, and David didn't know. Only the prophet and God knew that someday David would be king, and David would be as good as a king as he was a shepherd's boy. And that is the story about David. And I want to remind you that Jesus has a plan. God has a plan for you, just like he had for David. And you are very, very special, important person to God and to your family. And that God has a plan for you. And I hope that you'll remember that as you grow up and grow older in this world, boys and girls. God has a plan for all of us. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you back here next Sunday. Have a good week, boys and girls, and remember to always be kind, friendly, and helpful in everything you do. God bless.